Okay.
Just a minute, let me check with our control room. In a moment.
We're good on this end.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, yes, you can begin.
Hello.
Mr. Smithers, you can begin.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can begin.
Do we have a quorum?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Can
sir,
you
we
hear
do.
me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Yes, sir. You may begin.
Okay, let's go then if we have a quorum. Let's go to item 1. I'm trying to pull it up here on mine. I guess we need to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
We need to read the public comment, please.
Okay, the citizens who desire to address the city council, board, and or commission with regards to matters on the agenda will be read and or received at this time. Members of the public desiring to make comments during this portion of the meeting will be allowed to submit their comments as outlined above to the office of the city secretary. Written or email comments and or request to participate during this portion of the meeting must be received by 3 p.m. on Thursday, June 3rd, 2021, and the city of Sugar Land reserves the right to remove any written email comments deemed inappropriate as outlined above and or not related to matters posted on the agenda. Comments or discussions by city council, board, and or commission members will only be made at the time the subject is scheduled for consideration. And everybody understand that?
We did not have any public comments, sir.
Okay, moving on. The last meeting we had was December the 4th. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes for that?
Yeah, this is Robert Sawchuk. I'll motion to accept the minutes.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 You need a second, sir.
I'm sorry,
We have,
what?
we had a first. Do we have a second, please?
Yes.
Okay, Mr.
Mr.
Lusky.
Lusky.
Thank you.
Continued debate about how many people are.
All right, so we got a first and second. Christie, was the motion good? Or was the approval good?
Motion's good.
Okay. Now we have orientation, review of and discussion on the purpose, roles, responsibilities, and functions of the tax increment reinvestment zone number 1. Go ahead.
All right, so can everyone hear me there?
I can.
All right, so thank you all very much for this morning. Today we're going to review briefly your annual orientation for TERS 1. This is an orientation that's required by the city to give a high-level overview of the zone and the board's responsibilities. So that's required of City Council policy or resolution 15-24, and it also requires the one-time open meetings training, which I believe we have completed. This board has completed. Additionally, the state of Texas requires an annual conflict of interest, the open meetings training and the conflict of interest for training course, which is done by the city attorney. We will do that, that training with the city attorney in September. Next slide, please. So I want to bring everyone's attention to our new slate of our board of directors. We do have a couple of new additions since the last meeting that we had back in December. As you'll note, position number 4 has been filled by Mike Goodrum, who was unable to be on the call this morning, but is the new position 4 member for the city. And he was appointed by City Council back in December. And then I also want to draw your attention to position number 9. That's Ms. Yolanda Ford. who I believe has joined us on the call this morning. And I wanted to give a brief minute for Ms. Ford to say hello, if that's okay with the board.
Sure, go ahead, Yolanda.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Great, we're glad to have you on the board, Ms. Ford. Okay, and so the rules and procedures. So we do have a set of rules and procedures that were established back in 2003. They do provide clarity on how the TERS board works on administrative and operational procedures. And we do have, as you'll see there, we have a standard October to September fiscal year. We do have quarterly meetings, though we don't always hold a couple of them depending on the business to be conducted. But we will have our next meeting in September where we will approve the TERS budget by September 30th of next year. Next slide, please. You'll see here is a map of the zone, and it extends roughly from the Highway 59 frontage road to State Highway 6 to Town Center Boulevard North and the Mall Loop Road on the southwestern corner. It includes the area commonly known as Sugarland Town Square. Next slide, please. The TERS was created back in December of 1998. It included 64 acres at that point in time. We did amend the zone back in January of 2000 and reduce the acreage just to include the 32-acre town square development. And the zone is expected to expire in December of 2025. At the time that the board or the district was created, we did have a base value to set that baseline for the tax increment at $5,570,200, which is the same for all of the taxing entities involved in the board or involved in the TERS. Next slide, please. In 2001, both Fort Bend County and the LID agreed to participate in the zone at 100%, similar to the city's participation. And those participation agreements also give the county the right to appoint one member to the board of directors, which, as we just saw, has recently been filled by Ms. Ford. Next slide, please. The final project plan outlining the town square plans for a mix of retail, office, restaurant, hotel, and public space were adopted or approved back in March of 2002. The zone is responsible for funding roughly $11.5 million of public infrastructure, with the zone continuing to reimburse the city for funds made available to the developer as laid out in that 2001 development agreement. Next slide, please. A little bit more about the 2001 development agreement. It pledged $11.5 million in zone funds, again, back to the city for expenditures that the city made through its economic development corporations, its 4A and 4B corporations. The zone exceeded the earnings expectations set for it. And so a second amendment was approved in 2005 that advanced developer reimbursement schedule and dedicated an additional funding for 400 parking spaces in the parking garage to serve the conference center.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Before you go on, Cam, down
Yes,
there
sir.
when it's talking about the additional parking spaces, is the project success? Should that be access to 400 spaces?
That is I must admit, Mr. Smithers, this is a slide that has been pretty consistent for a number of years, and I appreciate you catching that. I will make that correction so that next year you're correct. Yeah, I think that should be projects access to 400 parking spaces. I think you're correct there. Thank you for noting that.
You bet. Go ahead.
Note on my notes here. Next slide, please. In 2010, the board did approve 2 separate contract agreements to support various events in Town Square. One of the contracts is with the Town Square Property Owners Association, for which the zone has budgeted $250,000 annually since that time. As we outlined in that contract, the 30% of those funds can be used for administration, and in order to receive the payment each year, the POA must submit their annual budget and present an update about previous and future events to the board, and we will get that presentation actually later this morning. And a similar contract is with the city, which the zone budgets $70,000 annually. Similarly, the city submits an annual plan of events and presents an update about the events to the board, and we will have that presentation in September. Next slide, please. We do, in 2003, the city and the zone mutually approved a support services agreement that allows the city manager to make expenditures to support various support functions for the zone. Expenditures are capped at $25,000, and in fiscal year 20, we budgeted $8,300 for that. And the support includes basic items such as general administrative services, financial services, legal services, and administration of contracts and projects. Next slide, please. The annual budget is approved annually in September. If you'll recall, back in December, we did make a revision to the fiscal year 2021 budget that's reflected on the slide below here. We did begin the year with about $2 million in estimated revenues and a balance of just under $100,000. And we made a number of expenditures, or are making a number of expenditures over the course of this fiscal year, including $1.6 million in reimbursement to the city's corporations for those items that we touched on earlier, $250,000 for the Town Square POA for the Plaza events. We did enact that special $100,000 contract with Reeves for the Holiday Santa's Magisphere activation back in December, as well as $70,000 for the city for Plaza events, and $10,000 for other miscellaneous fees such as insurance contracts and support services. We anticipate that we will end the fiscal year 2021 balance at $27,316. Next slide, please. We do perform one of the support services that city staff provides to the TERS is the development of an annual report. We approved that back in December, and at the time of the report being adopted by the board, it is transmitted to the city council for approval, and they approved that back in January. Next slide, please. And finally, touching on the board calendar, as I mentioned, we don't always hold the March meeting, which is why you're receiving this annual orientation in June, as well as an election of officers, which will occur momentarily. But we do stick to a pretty regular schedule quarterly other than that, with the development update, which we'll receive later this morning. We'll hear the presentation from the POA on their Plaza events, as well as in September, we work on budget, receive our ethics training, and then in December, we review the year's activities and recommend an annual report to City Council. At this point, next slide, and at this point, I'll take any questions y'all may have.
Cam,
Yes,
I
sir.
would, this is Alan Bogart. I wanted to comment or ask you to comment on the reason why the city does not have a fund balance requirement of any significance. It's like you're spending every dime we get. All of our funds, we typically have a fund balance requirement, but it's related to the obligations, and the obligations of this fund are preset by contract, and therefore there's no need for a significant fund balance. Is that okay?
I think you explained it better than I could, Alan. I appreciate that. Yes, and you're spot on. We do have set obligations to our corporations, existing contracts, and we only bring we only brought the additional contract item because we saw that we did have additional funding expected for our fund balance in fiscal year 2021. So I do appreciate that clarification.
Thank you.
That's why we keep you around, Alan.
Among many other good reasons.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that's all I have. Are there any other questions from the board?
I guess not. Next item, election.
Yeah. So this item is the election of the officers for 2021. Again, we would typically do this in March, but since we did not have the March meeting, we will conduct this now. Through the creation ordinance, the board is authorized to elect from within their membership a vice chairman and any other officers the board sees fit. And the city council does have the right to and always appoints a chairman each year. The board last selected position 8, which is Ms. Laura Richard, to serve as vice chairman in June 2020. And city council reappointed position 1 representative Don Smithers for a term ending December 31st, 2021 as chairman. The chairman's role is to preside over the meetings of the board and sign all documents requiring execution on the board's behalf, with the vice chair responsible for those duties in the chairman's absence. At this time, if there are no questions, I'll turn it over to Chairman Smithers for any nominations for vice chair and any other officers, though this board typically does not appoint any other officers besides vice chairman. But that is your prerogative.
We're open for nominations for vice chairman. Laura, are you willing to accept again, should you be nominated?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other nominations for vice chairman? Any other nominations? If there are no other nominations, I move that we elect Laura Richard by acclamation. Is there a second on that?
Second, this is Bogard.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and it passed. So you're hooked again, Laura.
Okay, thank you. Nice to be hooked.
All right. And
All right, Mr. Chair, I think we're going to turn it over for this item to our guest, Taylor Scott. If you want to prompt them on the POA contract, Town Square POA contract item.
okay, very good. Go ahead, Taylor Scott.
Good morning. How is everybody?
Good.
Good. Today I'm going to be covering the upcoming funding and event plan as well as a recap from the current funding period. So as we go through the presentation, just feel free to stop me along the way if you guys have any questions. Each year, the city and the development have come up with objectives and common goals for our event programming. This year looks a little bit different due to COVID, as you can imagine. So, but many of the goals remain the same. So some of those general objectives that we have each year for our programming are to bring events that produce customers from the greater Houston area, strive to safely bring quality entertainment to the plaza that will increase event attendance and help return traffic. Tenant participation, encourage tenants to participate in a greater manner by creating their own events, supporting ones already in place or hosting a booth space. Continue booking as many outside groups as possible, which is no cost to our program and generates traffic for Town Square. Reschedule events from 2020 in lieu of canceling them, therefore hosting more events than a typical year. Utilize creative and measurable marketing efforts to expand our reach, including pop-up shops and experiences like our photo opportunities that we've held for spring and for Eid. Increase sponsorship opportunities by curating events that have a need for vendors or align with local businesses' target markets. And of course, assist with economic development by enhancing the destination business and retail climate for regions. COVID brought forward a whole new world when it came to event programming, and while we're not totally out of the woods yet, we'll continue to implement things within the program to ensure safety and encourage people to attend. So within that, we are keeping our interaction and touching elements down, such as the lawn games, to provide, to a minimum as we continue to navigate the pandemic. We will continue to provide hand sanitation stations and social distancing signage at all of the events. Increase awareness of events and Sugar Land Town Square as a safe destination. Utilize as much advertising and technology as possible to remain relevant in the entertainment sector. And then of course, continue to be adaptable, which is the word of the last year. Think outside the box and be creative with our marketing and event structure to bring people together safely and responsibly. One of the things I did want to touch on back on the last slide is just, we also want to continue our communication with stakeholders, which includes the City of Sugar Land, retailers, and landlord partners. Reeves, as Cam had mentioned on one of the other slides, I did the holiday activation for the Magisphere, was retained in February of 2019. So Town Square's Property Owner Association is the partner with TERS for the event program, and with PCD managing the association and event program for the POA. The POA consists of numerous stakeholders, to include the City of Sugar Land, the Marriott, the City Plaza condos, and Lionstone as the owner for office and retail units. Our role is to manage the common areas of interest on behalf of all stakeholders, so we often use the saying that we make decisions for the good of the whole. When we speak specifically about the event program, the stakeholder involvement is focused on the city and the retailers. As you may recall, the retailers pay an annual assessment specific for the event program, and that contribution is supplemented by TERS. We do consider the impact and opportunities for the Marriott as we work to make Town Square a destination location. In February of 2019, Lionstone retained Reeby's for retail leasing and marketing, so we now consult with their team on activities that benefit the retailers, which is in addition to working directly with individual retailers and parks on the community events. Our core program remains the same for producing quality events that generate traffic for Town Square. So our goal with each of our partnerships is to listen to the needs of each stakeholder and to ensure that we use the dollars provided wisely and contractually obligated in a manner that meets the needs of each stakeholder. Does anybody have any questions about that partnership with Reeby's? No? Okay. So next, Plaza event overview. What you see here, sorry, go back, Gwen. There you go. What you see is a summary of attendance and the number of events per month. So as you can see from the program's inception in 2004, the numbers have changed drastically. This past year, we were only able to host 124 events. So the cost per attendee was really high at $140.28. That's due to our attendance being low, having to limit the attendance at our events with the restrictions in place, and we also had expenses for events that didn't happen.
That was COVID related, right?
Yes, exactly. So we're starting to see the numbers come back up now that people are getting more comfortable coming back into big crowds, and we don't have the restrictions. So we'll start to see those numbers change this next year. This year, we're utilizing a budget of $537,000 and estimate an attendance of around $57,000 to bring the cost per attendee back down to $9.45. So we anticipate that this will continue to go back down as things start to get back to normal.
Good.
Next slide. This slide shows a more detailed picture of the event cost per category. The cost per attendee is higher, obviously, due to limiting the event attendance for several months during the pandemic. Some of the other things that you'll see here is the Art of Wining and Dining is listed, and it has funding with it. Actually, yes, sorry, it's on there. But it didn't fall within the city's budget, which is why you don't see any attendees or anything listed. As you see, the tree lighting is also listed this year as 3 separate events, which was the substitute in lieu of the big tree lighting ceremony that we typically hold each year with the Parks Department. So that one was a series of a weekend that we partnered with them on to still bring people out, but in a safe way. Santa Visits took on a new look this year with the addition of the Magisphere, which was the interactive globe that you could talk to Santa in real time. This was attraction implemented by Reeby's, and we paid for the staffing, which was our typical Photos of Santa budget that we transferred over to them at $17,000. Next slide. We saw an obvious decrease in sponsorships with the pandemic, but we're starting to see an increase of interest now that people are starting to get back out and businesses are looking for ways to promote now that they're kind of on the back end of this thing. So the groups you see here are listed that have committed so far. So we have right now about close to $27,000, and we're projecting to bring in another $20,000, which will bring the total for this upcoming year right around $54,000. Our rescheduled events are going to give sponsors more opportunities to partner, as well as driving much needed traffic to Town Square. I'm going to let Wendy speak on this one.
So the budget was a little complicated this year. One more additional thing that COVID affected. And so if we look at normally what you see in this in this area is that our income and expenses match. And with the postponement of events this year, our expenses are less than what you would normally see. So our original budget in this area was $637,000, and our income actually is estimated to be $591,000, and that is greatly affected due to COVID. With events being canceled, there were sponsorships that were postponed. The shuttle service to Smart Financial was also discontinued when the events at Smart Financial were canceled. And then the outside groups that we normally would have that come in and pay for their own events were also discontinued due to COVID. And so those are the items that affected the income projections. So from 637 to 591,000. You can see in this program year, there's only $537,000 worth of expenses, and those also were less than the 637 because of COVID. So as Taylor's explained, we've had to postpone many events. We really felt like it was going to be necessary that when the economy opened and the restrictions were lifted, that we did everything possible to provide as much activity as we could for the retailers to help restart their businesses. And so there, in many instances, there were deposits paid for events. And so you have expenses, even though we didn't have as many events, and those will carry over into the next program year. So we really didn't want to cancel things, and we were very active. Taylor's done a great job in managing this entire program, which really honestly was decisions made on a week-by-week basis as the restrictions were changing. And so again, we kept pushing things, and we will have some events that will happen actually in the next program year so that we can kind of double up. And what you'll see when we get to the future slide on the next program year is that you'll see the opposite happen. So our income will be a little bit less than our expenses because we're going to use those dollars in the next program year, and it will balance out between the 2 years. Next slide.
Okay. So as we consistently monitor the success of our events and marketing program, we have a few items that we feel necessary that are to modify and expand. In order to do so, we stay in constant communication with our attendants to receive feedback and present opportunities to them to participate in the event programming. So some of those things obviously expand the involvement for the retailers through events, options to serve alcohol or food at more events, host booth spaces, create their own event in the plaza with our financial support. So some of those examples would be in collaborations as well that result in event partnerships, or the Magisphere that we hosted with Reeby's. The people that actually hosted the Magisphere are a future tenant of ours called Flight School, which is exciting, and we're excited to have them on board. Rhythm India is one that we've done in the past with the Bollywood Boogie. That's been a great event for us, but COVID made us shift, and we created an event called Just Dance, which was super fun and had a lot of people come out, and they did dance demonstrations that were socially distanced. We've done the photo ops that I mentioned for spring, and we partner with a tenant to do a giveaway for a gift card of some sort. We did one for Eid that was really popular. So we're trying to be very inclusive on what we do in the plaza for collaborations and partnerships. And then another example is this weekend we have Dancing Under the Stars with Fred Astaire tonight, and then tomorrow night we have a summer luau with Bar Louie because it is their anniversary. So just continuously trying to keep them involved in any way possible. Another thing is to promote events via paid ad on social media as we continue to try to gain more followers and attendees at the events. As you can imagine, due to restrictions, the events were more expensive, but we will start to see this decrease in 2021-22. Right now, we're still using additional staff to put out social distancing signage and hand sanitations. But some of these things that I'm going to go over really quick are the expense considerations that we had with COVID-19. So our cleaning efforts increased. We had additional event management required for each event to ensure protocol was followed. Fund social distancing efforts, which was more expensive to provide giveaways, and they were incorporated into each event. Fencing, signage, wristband, thermometers, masks were required. And of course, virtual events were more expensive to produce, to access the platform, production time, extended event time to ensure social distancing, et cetera. These graphs show post reach and proves that the paid content that we've been targeting people with is relevant because it converts to page likes and an increase in followers. So it's pretty interesting to look at these analytics from our Facebook page specifically. 76% of our fans are women, and the bulk of our followers are 35 to 44. We have a little over 15,000 people that are from Houston, and then Sugar Land is the next in line. On the orange graph, the paid ads are the darker orange color, which is showing how many people we're reaching. And then the organic ads, which are just normal posts that don't have any boosted dollars behind them, are the lighter orange. Where the page like happens is the graph that you'll see underneath that. And that's just showing us where people found us from, whether it's from they came directly to our page, they searched for us, they saw us on their news feed, or they saw us through a page suggestion. This displays our website activity, and it's pretty apparent that COVID has affected the number of people visiting our website over time. Last year, we had new user sessions at 87,000, and this year it's 72,000. So the key things to point out here are the peaks you see in the graph at the top are in conjunction with our weekly e-newsletter that we send out, which show that it is still driving traffic to our website and people are coming to see what we have going on and new tenants and things of that nature. Another thing too is even though we had less users, the session duration, which means people are staying on our website longer, has gone up, as well as the bounce rate has gone down, which means people come to our website, stay on it a little longer instead of just coming to it and just leaving right away. Here we touch on a few of events that have proven successful and that we would like to continue. In addition to our signature events we've hosted year after year, our themed tribute concerts have brought in great crowds and include unique cover bands such as the Beatles, ZZ Top, Dave Matthews Band, Queen, Stevie Nicks, George Strait, ZZ Top, and more. This past weekend we had Fab Five out here, which was the Beatles tribute cover, and we had at least 1,500 people out here, and it was really nice to see people back out in the plaza enjoying themselves. The event series concerts, Giving Spirits. I did go heavier on the concerts at the beginning of this year just because we didn't know exactly what the pandemic was going to look like once we started our event programming. So the concerts are an easy way to get an event on the calendar, but also keep social distancing, and there's not a whole lot of interaction. So still providing entertainment, but safely. Movies Under the Moon, Dancing Under the Stars. In our children's series, we added Vivaldi Kids music classes this year with our new tenant, Vivaldi Music Academy. Car shows, Car Culture is back, which is a lot of the exotic vehicles. They bring in a great crowd. We'll also still host our Corvette show and the Jaguar show in the fall. Landmark events, Superstar is in full swing. We have our Junior Superstar event on the 19th of this month. And then we will have our big Superstar, which is for 14 and up in July. We have plans to host our Art of Wining and Dining to promote our restaurants this year, do something along the lines of fashion show in the fall for our retail tenants. And then of course, the Christmas tree lighting is on the calendar for December 3rd. These are some more recommendations. The community events are a great addition to our programming because they're low cost to us and they provide a variety and different dynamic for our event programming. We've had quite a few inquiries of outside events or outside groups that are wanting to rent the plaza, which is a great thing. We've had groups that we've never had out here before show a lot of interest in book the plaza from us. So some of those include Apex Cheer. We've had gym guys out here, D1 Training Sugarland. A lot of fitness things, but we've also hosted the Houston Family Magazine annual camp fair. Again, this year, we've had a jazzercise class and a lot of other things. So continuing to keep that part of the program running. For the upcoming year, you can see our goal is to go beyond the typical event year. Our numbers are more as we continue to reschedule the postponed events from the past year in hopes to drive the much needed traffic back to Town Square. So we're hoping to have an approximate 278 events, with 98 of those being event series, 5 landmark events, and 175 community events, which includes those outside groups and awareness events within the program. Obviously, we want to continue to host safe events, increase attendance, generate quality traffic, capitalize on community organization and charitable events, utilize our social media opportunities, and take advantage of popular and seasonal adult and themed events. And then Wendy's going to chat on this one.
So this is our financial projection for the coming budget year. And as I mentioned on the prior slide, which is a recap of the program year we're in right now, last year we had more income, less expense, and it's the reverse here. So the goal is to utilize those dollars for the postponed events in this calendar year, drive additional traffic, and really push what we can to get the retailers back on track. And so for the income year, we have $622,000. That's more in line with what we see year over year from a budget. The contribution from the POA will be $284,000. Our sponsorship and outside group income at $68,000, which is more in line with what we would typically see. We will restart the shuttle program. We understand that Smart Financial is starting to get acts on the calendar. And so we are visiting right now with staffing and figuring out when we will actually restart the shuttle program, which is a great way to drive traffic to Town Square, especially on the weekends, by having the shuttle destination be there on the plaza. And it's just a great way to bring people to Town Square to come before or after a show, have dinner, have coffee and desserts. And so we will restart that program as the calendar for Smart Financial begins to grow. Part of this commitment is with the anticipation that we would receive funding again from TERS. And so we budgeted $250,000 into this overall program budget with that contribution. So again, that gets us to $622,000 for the program year. Expenses follow the activities that Taylor has talked about, our event series, landmark events, community events, media promotion, and taking advantage of finding ways to actually help our retailers in that realm, the administrative costs to make all of this happen, and then again our shuttle service, which is a wash in and out for income. So our expenses are $675,000. The difference there again is the carryover from last year. I think we can go to, there we go.
These slides are just the categories and how each of these programs and titles break down. So the event series, which is the 98 events that I had mentioned, would be 9 movies under the moon, around 66 concerts, 5 giving spirits, which I didn't update in here, but we're starting to call that series Bands for Good. Children's series, which involves Splash Bash, the children's music classes, a magic show, and events like that. And then 3 Dancing Under the Stars. Landmark events include Sugarland Superstar Series, Art of Wining and Dining, the Project One Way Fashion Show, and the Christmas tree lighting. And then in conclusion, we this next year are going to strive to continue to be adaptable, reschedule as many events as possible, consistently request feedback from tenants on business benefit for events and promotions, and shape the program accordingly, generate more tenant involvement, help promote their spark promotional ideas, new partnerships which enhance event activities and bring regionally attended events to Town Square. Hopefully we'll start to see some of the big ones come back, like the Indonesian Festival and things like that were on the calendar before the pandemic hit. So I think they're just waiting it out to see exactly what's going to happen, and then we'll get those back on the calendar. New partnerships, focus on expanding marketing opportunities, and of course we've maintained a consistent fun-filled calendar. year-round, including fitness in the plaza every Friday. And our focus continues to be on generating frequent quality events for the community to enjoy and events that are fun and exciting. So we just want to thank you guys for your time today, and we'll open it up for questions if anybody has any.
All right, thanks for the presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
This is Laura. I just wanted to comment that given all of the restrictions and parameters that Wendy and her staff had to meet, I think they did a great job. I went to, some of the events this past year with my family, and it seemed like, people thought it was a safe environment to be in. And I think they just appreciated that there was something to do outside. And I just wanted to thank them for everything they did and their adaptability through all of the hurdles that they had to go through this past year.
Thank you so much.
That's true, Laura, and considering the year we've been through, it's amazing that we came out as well as we did. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Before we take motion, could you please read the caption before you take the motion?
I'm sorry, do what?
Before you take a motion, would you please read the caption on the agenda?
Okay, I shall, when it
Thank you.
shows up.
It'd be helpful if we popped it back up for you, Mr. Smithers.
Yes, please.
Yes, just a moment, please.
While that's going on, Mr. Smithers, I will say that just wanted to note that Taylor and Wendy have provided, per the contract, there is required documentation that they're required to provide to the city and the TERS every year. And they provided that documentation already, and we're reviewing it, but everything's seemingly in order with the documentation they provided so far.
Okay, good. And if you can there we go. Okay. The item 7, consideration of an action on fiscal year 2021 plaza events annual payment in the amount of $250,000 to Sugarland Property Owners Association Incorporated, and request expenditures in the amount of $250,000 for Sugarland Property Owners Association Incorporated events in the fiscal year 2022 budget. Okay. Do I have any? Yes, Mr. Lusky.
No, was
Oh, okay.
just ahead of you. I was
All right. Do I have any questions?
making the motion.
Okay, the motion's been made by Mr. Lusky. Do I have a second?
I'll second it. This is Robert.
Okay, Robert. And all right, we have a motion and a second. Now, there's any further comments on the motion? If not, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All in favor of this motion?
Aye.
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 I see Alan came active, but I didn't hear from him.
Aye. That's a positive vote, sir.
That's very good, Alan. Yolanda, how's your vote?
Aye.
Okay. And we have any other members? Look like everybody's voted. Any opposed? Okay, the motion passed.
Great. If Mr. Smithers, if you're comfortable with that, I'll move on to give the 2020 development update for the TERS 1.
All right. Go
All
ahead.
right. Thank you, sir. Jumping in, today we're going to review the 2020 development update. And just a note, this is going to be a review of the zone as it was December roughly December 31st of 2020. So the numbers you're going to see are smack dab in the middle of our pandemic year that we went through. So we are going to tell a story today. I'll try to make this as brief as possible, but we're going to tell a story about how Town Square and TERS 1 weathered this once in a century global pandemic. Some of the numbers in here may be a little tough to look at, but we do see some optimism in some of the numbers and some of the trends we're seeing in 2021. And so I'll make sure to note that as we go through it. And I just want to kind of preface this by saying we have weathered this storm, as was noted during the comments in the last presentation. We have weathered this pandemic better than we could have, and I think that's a testament to not only the city and the TERS, but your specifically foresight and action and planning and being proactive about what the work that we're doing in this TERS zone. So I want to thank you for that. This is the slide actually. Excuse me.
Well, let me interject something here. I think considering the pandemic and what all we've been through, I think that we came out relatively well at 81%.
Yes, sir. We're like I said, we are doing much better than I think some other areas, and much better than we could have been doing. So I think that's a testament to the way that this development's been structured and the way that this board has supported that development over the past 20 years. So we're going to start with office occupancy here. As you can see, the top line number there is that office occupancy has decreased to about 81%, and that is down a bit from 2019, but that is a number that we are hoping to continue to work to improve and get back up to closer to that 90% rate over the next period of time. Next slide, please. Looking at a number that definitely impacts the TERS and our ability to perform our functions is the assessed value of that office development. As you'll note, there was a comment prior to the presentation or prior to the meeting this morning that there was concern on maybe values going down due to the pandemic, but that's actually not what we're seeing here. Looking at our office assessed values, they have continued to increase in 2020. And we see, looking at preliminary numbers, they are continuing to increase again in 2021. But as you'll note here, we do have a total assessed value for just the office buildings for the Town Square development at $93.4 million. And that is an increase, a 2018 to 2020 increase of just over 5%. So we are continuing to see healthy growth in these property values. Next slide, please. Just to note, there are no continuing office abatements for the TERS 1 area. Next slide, please. Looking at the retail and restaurant occupancy rate, these numbers are a little tougher than those office numbers, and that's something that we're continuing to monitor and see come back up as we come out. Again, these numbers do reflect the end of 2020, so that was kind of the low point there. But we do see an occupancy rate, a total occupancy rate for retail and restaurant space in the development at 67.7%. We have continued to maintain our communication with Reeves, who's not on the call this morning, but who you've met in the December meeting. And we have continued to stress to them the importance of getting our retail and restaurant occupancy back up to that 90% threshold. And that was a number that was set back in our initial development agreement in 2002 as a number that triggered reimbursement to the developer of the various infrastructure expenses that this board is continuing to reimburse the city for. So that is the number we are continuing to work with them to get the restaurant and retail back up to. They are hearing what we're saying in regards to the retail and restaurant space, and they're already back above 70% for as of April of this year. And they do have leases in the pipeline, not finalized, but in the pipeline that will get the occupancy back up to 80% for our conversations with them. So we do continue to see promise in the work that they're doing and the conversations that we're having with them. And one development of note that I believe some of you may have attended an opening a couple of weeks ago for the Art Museum Texas, and that's on the western corner of the plaza. it's the space across from Altered State. And that is the Art Museum Texas, and that's a result of a partnership between the city and the museum. And we feel that brings a destination to Town Square and utilizes a highly visible space there on the corner of the plaza that has been vacant for multiple years. And so that project is the result, not only the partnership between the city and the museum, but also the action of Reeves in bringing that attraction to the development. Next slide. So this is the tenant map, and as you can see, the space in the top left corner of the plaza there is that art museum along that road that fronts the plaza. This that's the current slate of active and coming soon developments to the plaza area, or to the Town Square area. Next slide, please. Thank you. So looking at the tax revenues for the district, we did see a slight decrease or a decrease, not necessarily slight, in sales tax revenues between 2019 and 2020. And I will note that as we noted last year in last June's development update for 2019, we are utilizing a new sales tax monitoring software that allows us to better gauge the actual sales tax revenues generated in any given geography throughout the city. So there is a jump between 2018 and 2019, and that reflects us being able to monitor businesses that we weren't previously able to monitor as closely. So we do have that increase from 2018 to 2019 and the decrease during the pandemic year. We see the sales tax generated per occupied square foot, including sales tax and mixed beverage taxes, has decreased about 35 cents per square foot over the course of that year, which is consistent with the drop that we saw in other areas of the community. But as it's worth noting that the bottom did not fall out of the sales tax generation in the district. It is still over $1 million, which is a solid number. Mixed beverage taxes were tough this year. Understandably so, given the fact that many of our restaurants were relegated to go orders only over the course of 2020. But this does bring a couple of points to light. First, we did see throughout the pandemic that food and beverage was hit in areas harder than retail when it comes to sales tax generation. And Town Square does have a higher food and beverage to retail ratio than the city as a whole. So that's something that's reflected here in these numbers, but also something that as we continue to come out of the pandemic should continue to improve. Next slide, please. So looking at the breakdown between restaurants and retails, as I just noted, we do have a relatively high, almost even number of restaurants and retailers, but square footage wise, we are more of a restaurant center than we are a retail center. And we do have just over 90,000 square foot dedicated to restaurants within the development, and just over 76,000 square foot dedicated to retailers. And again, just wanted to note that we are working with Reeves to PCD and Alliance Stone to get that occupancy back up to closer to 90%, which was again the original goal of the development. Just to note, we did have we'd had a number of closings in 2020, a couple prior to the pandemic and a number during, but we did have a number of business openings as well. We had State Fair, Sweet Paris, and Vivaldi Music have all opened recently in the Town Square development, and so that is promising that there are new businesses that continue to see Town Square and TERS 1 as a premier location for bringing their developments. And if you haven't had a chance to eat at either State Fair or Sweet Paris, I know I've contributed to their sales tax contributions personally over the past year going into the office. So they are some really neat concepts that have come to development. Next slide, please. Looking at the condominiums, the taxable value changes to the condominiums, we have continued to see a slight decrease in those taxable values, and want to make a quick note about some of the numbers behind those frontline numbers with a total taxable value of $37.9 million. While the value of the condos the taxable value has decreased. It's worth noting that the value of the exemptions, the homestead and other exemptions included on those, increased at nearly 10% year over year from 2020 to 2019. And the assessed values only decreased about 1.7%, so only about $250,000, showing that about $250,000 of that decrease in taxable value is the result of increased exemptions. Now, I was not able to make a determination as to whether that's an increase in the amount or the value of those exemptions, but it does give us a little bit more of a nuanced picture of what's happening with the condos, noting that very minimal depreciation on the assessed values themselves, but the exemptions really driving that overall decrease. Next slide, please. Thank you. Finally, want to touch on the status of our conference center and hotel. One thing worth noting, and I brought it up when we met last June to discuss this, was that at that point in time we had not seen the impacts of COVID in our hotel, our hot revenue numbers. Well, you're seeing it here on the screen this morning. 2020 was a difficult year for hotels across the world. And our Marriott was no exception. We did see, you do see that the numbers presented here are on a little bit of a lag, so you don't really see the COVID impact start to show up until you get to the Q3 numbers, which you'll note is down 21.6%. That reflects that the pandemic closures really started late in February and March. And then Q4, which reflects the April to June numbers, you do see the almost cessation of rental hotel visits and occupancy for that quarter, 87.9% decrease from the same time period in 2019. Showing these numbers, I want to reassure everyone that while the pandemic did have an impact, we do see that there are brighter days ahead. We did benefit from a couple of key partnerships over the last year with our hotel here in Town Square. One being the Constellation Energy League that played at Constellation Field. The Skeeters organization did book players and their families at the Marriott as part of their bubble. And we do see that when those numbers come in for the July period, we should see that those numbers do look better than might otherwise be expected due to their presence in the hotel there. Even with the ownership change and the transition to AAA, the Skeeters have maintained that relationship for a couple of additional years. And so that's going to continue to provide additional occupancy during the midweek sessions, which really does offset the delay that we're seeing in the return to conferences for the center. We did see also an impact from the Magisphere promotion that this board participated in from December. The Marriott saw over 1,000 room nights booked with the promo code for that event. And so that clearly provided a positive impact for occupancy of this hotel. And speaking of conferences, while they are slow to return, they are, I am told, in fact, returning. We do have a few beginning to be scheduled for June and July. Including the first Sugarland iteration of the Junior Theater Festival, which is it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a festival of different theater shows from youth, and they have a number of events across the country. And this will be the first time they have done an event in Sugarland. They were attracted by not only our premier hotel conference center space, but also the presence of Smart Financial Center. And that event is booking over 700 room nights in July. And that conference or that event will be recurring annually. And it's coming to Sugarland as a result of active mid-pandemic recruitment by our Sugarland economic development staff. So really seeing the benefit of, it was downtime and it was a rough time for a lot of the hotels, but the way we were able to be proactive during the pandemic, especially on recruitment, because we knew that we'd come out of it, is paying off starting this July with the Junior Theater Festival coming to the city.
Just a quick question, and it may or may not be relevant. Are you seeing any effect since Minute Maid moved out?
I do not think, I'm not able to speak to that as far as impact to the hotel revenues. I haven't dug deeply enough into the timing of that and any changes to the hotel. But we can look into that and maybe provide a recap on that when we come back in September.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. And make a note of that.
How much footage was, square footage did Minute Maid take up? Yeah,
Yeah, I may tap on Elizabeth to help me with those numbers in particular. I know they had a couple of floors there in that building, but I'm not certain on the exact square footage.
Yeah, so they were leasing the 5th floor and half of the 4th floor. So it was about 45,000 square feet. And they had actually just re-signed a new lease where they were vacating the 8th floor so that they could renovate the 4th and 5th. And they finished all of their construction, but they were never actually able to move in due to the pandemic. So, but yeah, I think, and Wendy, you might be able to speak on it a little bit more as well. But what's on the market for sublease right now is about 45,000 square feet.
And you're correct, Elizabeth. That's the correct square footage. They did an extensive, approximately $3 million renovation right as it concluded, right as the pandemic hit, and they never occupied this space.
but they're still paying on it.
They are paying the rent. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
All right. So thank you both, Wendy and Elizabeth, for that context on that question. So the last slide we have here is a reflection of the just how we have performed relative to our last updated forecast to how the development was anticipated to perform with regards to various tax revenues. So in 2020, you do see that we made a greater TERS assignment, so payments to our corporations than was initially projected in our projections there, 1.6 million as opposed to just under 1.5. Sales tax, we did, this is not include mixed beverage tax, but just straight sales tax. We do still see that we have outperformed our earlier projections for 2020. Now we do fall under the projections for hot tax and mixed beverage tax, which is understandable, which brings our total revenue down just below the projections. But I do want to note, while that's about 3.7% lower than what our previous model had anticipated, the sales tax numbers do continue to outperform. And these numbers are a reflection of the type of impact that the pandemic had, right? So shopping still occurred, although it was at a lower level than 2019. But the lack of travel and the bar and restaurant closures and occupancy restrictions did clearly impact those two hot and mixed beverage tax accounts. With all that, we do continue to see brighter days ahead, and I'm confident that as soon as we have turned the corner on this pandemic, we will continue to see improvements in these numbers and overall conditions and leave this 2020 year far in the past. We're probably going to have to continue caveating the 2020 numbers when we do future development updates, just so that we know what we're comparing ourselves to. With that, I'll be glad to take any additional questions that y'all may have regarding the 2020 development update.
Anyone have any questions or comments? Good report, Cam.
Thank you very much. Believe that's our last item for the agenda for this morning.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions, comments, anything they want to bring up before we close down? If not, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Mr. Lusky made a motion to adjourn. We'll get a second.
Second.
Second by Miss Richard. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, everybody, for showing up.
Thank you all.